Welcome to Accessibility in Practice with Accessible Community, where we talk with people shaping a more accessible world. I'm Adam Fishbein, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Peter Slatin, a leading voice in disability and accessibility. Thanks so much for being here, Peter.
Thank you, Adam. I'm so happy to be here and to be part of this. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, so let's dive in. First off, can you tell us a bit about your background and what drew you into the field of disability and accessibility?
Well, sure. I'm a blind man. Um, I've gone slowly blind over the course of my life. I'm 71. I have both retinitis pigmentosa, which destroys your night vision and also your peripheral vision, and I have macular degeneration, which I got in my 40s, which destroys your central vision. So I now see thousands, hundreds of thousands, billions of lights flashing in front of my eyes all the time. And I do have some light perception. I got into accessibility as a profession only about not even 15 years ago. I worked as a journalist for most of my career and wrote, not only occasionally did I write about accessibility and disability, but I wrote mostly about architecture and urban design issues and commercial real estate and finance, all relating to the built environment. Um, and so I got to occasionally explore accessible design, universal design, whatever you want to call it. Uh, but then in 2012, an opportunity arose for me to dive fully into this world. Whereas before, I'd always said I didn't want to be a professional blind person, that is, make my living as a person who is blind because I'm blind. Um, I completely reversed course and said, I'm happy to be part of that. And I'm going to, you hear a siren in the back because I'm in New York City.
Well, that's really interesting to hear. So, I mean, not the siren, the your story. Um, so okay, so it sounds like you kind of you had that reversal, of course. So would you say that was the particular moment that that kind of shaped your journey and that
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, I basically, I had as a journalist, and I founded and ran a magazine and a website and won editorial awards, etc. And I
Wow.
traveled all across the US and globally, tracking down stories, writing down stories, finding writers, interesting things, etc. And I was always, as a blind person, really upset and annoyed at the way I was treated by people in customer service, whether it was at an airport, in a taxi, at a hotel, a restaurant, a store. And I thought, why isn't there a program to train these folks how to interact with people with disabilities? And then one day I was trying to go into a store where I'd been before, a big store, like a grocery store, and I had my guide dog, and on previous visits, they'd assigned me to a human to guide us through the store so I could get what I needed. Well, on this occasion, they said, "I'm sorry, we spoke to our lawyers, or our lawyers spoke to us and said you are a liability and we can't let you in."
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, and I'll name names. The store was Italy, the huge, wonderful.
I know
Uh,
Italy.
yeah,
Wow. Wow.
and I just flipped out. It was very unpleasant, and made an appointment to go visit their head of HR the next day, or maybe yeah, I think it was HR, head of training, whatever.
Hmm.
And I went to their offices and I spoke to them and I said, I've long wanted to develop a program to train people in customer service about service to people with disabilities. And because I definitely didn't want this to be just about blind people, but to run the gamut. And they were interested, but not really. And I knew I wouldn't get any money. So I went off and set about designing a program that I could use. I'm not an educator, I'm not a trainer, but I am blind and I have experience. I write, I think. So I created a program that I thought would work in the settings I envisioned it in. And I took that to the owner of a CEO of a hotel company I'd known for years and said, this is what I'd like to do. What do you think? And he said, send me a proposal. And so I got off to a good start. And
That's
that was
great.
a long time ago.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a pretty impressive background in disability and accessibility. So based on that experience, are there any particular myths or misconceptions about disability and accessibility that you
No, there
find
are no
yourself
myths.
always correcting?
Um, I think there are many. I break the world into I break the world of accessibility into three elements, three foundations, however you want to call them. Um, and that is how I approach what I do. We all are familiar with the physical accessibility, how to design places, the built environment to be fully accessible, and that is the biggest change we've seen because that, of course, started in 1990. And, people are familiar with that, whether they really want to deal with it or not. But it's out there. It's mostly well understood. Then there's digital accessibility, meaning websites, apps, anything media related, videos, movies, you name it. How do you make this digital material accessible so that someone who is print disabled, which can be anyone who is blind or someone who is dyslexic or ADHD or you name it, has a condition that makes it difficult for them to read, has mobility, a digital dexterity issue with manipulating a mouse or whatever on a computer. So digital accessibility is a real thing. And even though it's been talked about for decades now, it is still really misunderstood by people in the web design and development world. It is because it's a complicated thing, but there are ways to design a website or whatever you design so that it is fully accessible. And just like it can be expensive to take a building that was built before 1990 and retrofit it to be accessible. It's so much easier to do it from the start. And the same is true with web design. So that's digital accessibility, and that's a big work in progress. But I call what I do social accessibility. Someone said it was cultural accessibility. I'll go with that too. But because I'm not an architect and I'm not a coder or developer, but I am very much in the world. And I believe the biggest barrier to accessibility, to full integration of people with disabilities into society, is social, more than physical, more than digital, because it precedes everything. If we understand disability as just another way of living, rather than all these other things, like meaning you're broken or you're ill or you're pitiable or low expectations you can't achieve, Um, if we have a society that accepts disability as a natural and normal way to be that can be improved upon, that needs accommodation, all that can be met. But then we can start to see design, the world of design, whether it's digital or physical, make accommodations from the start rather than have to rethink everything later.
Hmm. Yeah, being proactive rather than reactive. Yeah, that's
You know,
interesting.
thank you. I want to go back to your question, which led into my long disquisition. But one of the most difficult things that happens, I think, for any person with any disability, certainly with apparent disabilities, is physical touch from other people. Other people always want to help me, and so they will grab me without thinking. They'll push me and pull me. And of course, if I can say, use your words, tell me that the chair is behind me. Don't push me into it. You know,
Hmm.
but and this can be on a scale that's anywhere from annoying and humiliating to very dangerous. Um, so it's something to be aware of. Yet I do know that for people who use ASL, who speak ASL, uh, and for deaf people in general, touch is an important thing. So it's not the same for everybody, but I know for me, for my friends who are wheelchair users, they often find that someone interferes with them physically. So yeah, I'd say that's a very, very fulsome uh, illustration of what is in the way, what gets between someone with a disability and participating in society.
Yeah, so I want to follow up on one thing you said. So it's what you were saying, like accessibility isn't one size fits all, right? So
Definitely not.
how do you see things like race, gender, or economic status or other kind of intersecting um identities interacting
Well,
with disability?
this is a wonderful question because in our um, theoretically broke woke environment where we don't want to think about diversity, and gosh, it's terrifying to think about diversity. Um, of course, I used to say that accessibility and disability were the poor stepchildren of the DEI movement because the DEI movement grew out of race and gender um, discrimination, uh, and then just grew from there. And accessibility became something of an afterthought. And did it belong there? Did it not belong there? But the truth is, disability itself, is the most intersectional of all of these things that make up a diverse world. Um, it doesn't care for age, it doesn't care for race, for gender, for sexual orientation, for uh, religion,
Yeah.
faith. It just doesn't.
It doesn't
Everybody,
disability doesn't discriminate.
no,
That's what I've always kind of said and
exactly.
heard. Yeah.
And so, does this mean that it is not about diversity? No, it doesn't, because because we haven't, as a society, really come to the point where we accept people with disabilities fully into the workplace, into the social environment. The stats on unemployment for people with disabilities are just um, are huge, and I want to say something about 30% of people with disabilities have some kind of employment. Um,
I believe it's actually less. Yeah. I don't know the latest statistics,
yeah,
but so don't hold me to that. But
but I
yeah,
think that's in the ballpark.
yeah, in the
And
ballpark.
um, and so, where am I going with this? Oh, back to diversity. And, so of course we know that when people with different points of view and different life histories, different um, cultures and races and all kinds of differences get together, they are going to produce more interesting products, more interesting services, more interesting approaches to business and to any other organization. They're going to enhance an organization rather than um, distract from it or subtract from it. And there's so much fear about that from the normative status quo. And, we're living with that fear extremely out there right now, uh, doing its best to shout, "Go away, people with disabilities, or Black people, or people of anything that's not white cisgender male. Please go away." To me, that's just the last gasp. Um, it may
Mhm.
be a very long and painful last gasp. This is not to dismiss it, but in the end, I think that will not be the way society is. Um,
Yeah. So let's zoom in a little bit, okay?
sure.
So thinking about kind of policy and best practices,
Ooh.
what are some really tangible things that you wish every organization would do to build a more inclusive environments and more accessible environments?
I would ask them to make sure their website is fully accessible, make sure their space is fully accessible, help make sure that their employees with disabilities feel safe disclosing. Disclosing is always difficult because if you don't disclose that you have a disability, but you need an accommodation, um, but you try and hide it or pass with it, whatever you want to call it, your performance will suffer. On the
Yeah.
other hand, there's a good reason that people don't disclose, which is they fear discrimination, ignorance. Most discrimination stems from ignorance, from fear, from fear of being, oh, I don't want to be like that. Oh, when people say, oh, it must be horrible to be blind, or they ask, which is worse,
Mm.
to be blind or deaf, or
Oh,
these questions are,
microaggressions.
yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I think employers have to start with themselves, look at themselves. Who in the C-suite has a disability, and how have they dealt with that through their lives? And do they get an extra gold star for becoming a CEO with when they were blind, or wheelchair users? They they don't get a gold star, but they get credit for doing what everybody else does to get there, which is either to make all the right networking connections or really just to perform as well as possible. Um, and constantly do their best. And that's what should make success. It doesn't always, because doing your best doesn't always lead to success, of course. Um, but I think they have to look within, and then they can look without, and you can create that. Like, I see just a spreading ripple. If you start with yourselves and your own company, and you look at the bottom and the top, and you engage in honest conversation. I don't want to be too Pollyannish, but you have to look at your employees, then look at your vendors, and look at your customers, and how can you make things inclusive? And what is inclusion about? You know, I have my own issue with the word inclusion, because getting back to my earlier points about living, we're all living normally. Um, if someone wants to include me, what right do they have to include me? I'm here already. I'm included. So why are you deciding to include me when you can certainly decide to exclude, but I can still be included if I insist on it. And inclusion is, to me, it's just a way of reaffirming the um, the privilege, reaffirming privilege.
Hmm. So, and just to go back to something you said before about giving credit for how people got to where they are.
Yep.
Um, I would actually say that you have to give credit just for getting to where people getting to where they are in in the way that they did. But and maybe this is a little controversial, but even with people with disabilities or people with barriers to
Mm.
getting to that level,
Yep.
you have, I mean, I feel like, you deserve a little more credit because there were so, and of course, a lot of people have different barriers,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But, some not all barriers are created equal.
This is true, and you raise a really good point. And um, I guess the question comes down to how do you want that credit to be allocated, to be given, to be shown, um, and how do you want not to um, exploit it?
Yeah.
Um, or if you feel like you can exploit it, when is it okay to exploit it? When is it not okay to exploit it? Do
Well,
I use my privilege to pre-board a plane because I have a guide dog? Yes, I do. Um, do I absolutely have to? No, I don't. But I appreciate the opportunity.
that's a good example. Yeah. Okay, um, so speaking of kind of the interpersonal aspect of uh and like credit and kind of
Hmm.
how we uh kind of interact with our disabilities, what adv and people around us, what
Yes.
advice do you have for people with disabilities or their advocates as they navigate a world that often doesn't understand what they're going through?
Wow. This is a great question. And I will say what one of my professors, I'll say it, my painting professor said in when I was taking classes to earn a Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting, when I had much more vision. I was still already legally blind, but I love painting. And she said to the class, she said, do as I say, not as I do. And I say that because I have a very hard time when someone uh, acts out in a way that is upsetting because I have a disability, that somehow uh, makes me feel diminished, humiliated, whatever. I try to control my rage, um, but so in other words, my advice is um, just let it ride over you and try to explain where you are, or just say, yeah, well, you're wrong. Do something that just shows that you are in control of yourself in the situation,
Hmm.
rather than flipping out and screaming at them because they are, ignorant,
A bigot.
foolish, bigoted people. Yes. Um, which is not to say you have to be all, like the nicey nicey person. You can be, nasty, but do it without, you know, uh, screaming. But I'm sorry, I'm just going to digress. I just recently heard a discussion about, there are people who are urging, we must be civil. They're urging civility, which is what I
Mm,
just did. But then someone said, well, civility is the tool of the privileged to control the underprivileged, a tool for those who have it, have whatever to control people who don't but want, So if I can say, well, you have to be civil, don't get all angry. So I just told everyone to be civil, and I'm not going to say forget it, don't be civil, just be smart. I guess I'll say
hmm Yeah.
be attuned to the
Pick,
situation.
pick your battles. I think
Yeah,
picking your
very well
battles is
said.
also part of that. That's kind of a subset of it. Okay. So speaking of kind of being smart and
Mm.
trying to figure out how to pick your battles, for listeners who want to make a difference, what's one thing they could do to start supporting disability rights and better access?
Um, well, I'd say whether you have a disability or you want to be an ally, think about where your strength is. What do you love to do? How do you love to relate to people? Um, where do you think you can add to the discussion, whether it's around education, whether it's around web disability, digital accessibility, whether it's around physical access to spaces and design, um, or whether it's about social interaction, about helping people to learn more about disability, more about accessibility. Find what is your strength? Where do you think you can have the most impact with the least amount of um, just excess energy? So you can put your energy to work fruitfully. Um, that's what I'd say. Think about,
Hmm
and you can do that. You can also think about um, who do you know in your family or your friends and colleagues? What experience do you have of disability that you can, from someone else, that you can say, oh, I learned something from listening to my uncle talk about his deafness or um, something like that. What can you bring to the table that brings your perspective, but also acknowledges theirs, and then
hmm
built on it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, even I'm sorry if you're an attorney or a an activist or whatever, and you want to get involved in policy, that's and you feel like you have not only an understanding of the law or want to get an understanding of the law, but you also have the gift of persuasion, and you feel like you can really help advocate for whatever, whether it's accessible transportation, um, accessible spaces, accessible braille literacy. Where do you see yourself bringing the biggest and best self?
Mm, Yeah, well, that's a good one. Um, okay. So switching gears a little bit. Uh, let's talk about tech for a minute.
Okay.
What innovations are you genuinely excited about in terms of improving accessibility? And are there underrated low-tech solutions you think deserve more attention?
Yeah, great question. Um, I'm, well, I love screen readers. I just love
Mm,
them because they are my key to the world. As a writer, as a reader, um, God, without them, and since I didn't learn Braille until I was 60 and my Braille reading is very slow, it's just wonderful to have that availability. I'm so what I'm excited about is there are a few things. I'm actually excited to watch how things like meta glasses develop. Um,
Mm,
you
yeah.
know, I know people who love them. I tried them once. I'm not sure yet, but maybe at some point, you know, they'll be what I want. Um, I love that people are uh, trying hard to develop new things, new ways of for blind people to be oriented in their world, um, whether you're indoors or outdoors. Uh, I'm going to here's a caution, and I say this from experience, lived experience. I know some allies who are very involved in tech for blind people, and they have, of course, the best of intentions. They really want to make a difference, but they don't hire or listen to blind people.
Mm. You,
So,
you can't have a disability and accessibility podcast without saying nothing
yeah,
about us without us, right?
yes. So, and I think I get it that they want really to help, but don't be afraid also. So I'm interested in I will want to watch that. I want to see when wheelchairs become um, ergonomic and
Mm,
adaptable to individual bodies. And you know, when will that happen? Why is that so hard? What is stopping that from happening? Whether it's uh, I don't know because it's not my world, but there are companies that control the manufacture of wheelchairs. When will airlines learn not to break or lose wheelchairs? But
hmm
technology is great and it's making life better, improving the world for us. But personally, I'm more excited about people learning
mm,
about disability.
yeah. Well, that makes complete sense. So, okay, here's another question.
I'm ready.
Do you have a fate, you've been working with kind of companies, institutions
Yeah.
for a while. Do you have a favorite example of a company or institution that's getting it right, or at least making real progress?
Yes, I do. I have a couple examples in the hotel world, hospitality world. I think I can think of two different companies if that I've had personal experience with as a trainer, as an educator, where I've had this experience, I had a great experience, and then looked on their website and I see that they actually are walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Um, and one is called Rosewood Hotels. Um, they have very high-end hotels. Oh, both of these are high-end hotels. I got hotel companies. The other is a company called Noble House Hotels. And what they do is they listen to their employees. They're not afraid to hear what they have to say.
Mm,
Um, you know, it's still not automatic. Oh, just because you say that doesn't mean we'll do it. Um, I think um, it's my whether if my experience is good. Um, when I go someplace, someone once asked me, "What's the most accessible experience you've ever had in New York City?" And I said, "I don't know what that is because if it was super accessible, I just did it.
yeah, yeah.
It just happened. I have had some. I think I've had some great experiences at museums. The Guggenheim Museum has done a great job and the Whitney and MoMA have done really worked hard to bring uh, blind and low vision people, people with autism or developmental disabilities into the museum world um, to show them things on uh, in a ways that they can understand. And I think that's so important and so impressive.
Yeah.
That's and I think museums are actually ahead of the curve, at least in the U.S. Um, cities, there are some cities that try hard, but cities are incredibly complicated organisms. They can pledge to try and be accessible, but it's uh, it's a big ask. But I think hiring people to deal with it, paying real money, um, not just beyond lip service, beyond the accessibility statement on your website. What can you do to enrich the experience of accessibility in your city, in your home, in your place of business, whatever, wherever you go? What can you do to be aware that it's not something to fear, but something to embrace?
Yeah. That's really interesting. So, how about airlines? Have some been more accessible than others?
I'm sorry, some which
Airlines?
airlines? Um, no, I will say I know that Delta has a robust program that's like an advisory group, disability advisory group.
Hmm.
And the airlines in general there's an airline advisory group, and there's there's an organization called Open Doors Organization, ODO, which is really focuses on training airlines, or really focuses more on airports. But for all the work they do, what happens is it gets down to the individual um, flight attendant or gate attendant who, no matter how many times they've been told, don't speak to a guide dog, don't pet it or feed it without asking the handler. They may have been told this, but they don't follow that. Every airline I've ever flown on has someone has, you know, broken that protocol, and someone professionally. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think there's so much work to be done with airlines. Amtrak is trying, but I've had great and poor experiences with Amtrak. I
Hmm.
think the rideshare companies have lot to a lot to apologize for. They
Absolutely.
and everyone knows this, and it goes to the heart of what I do as a trainer and educator is why is it so hard to offer this service to people? And sure, it would help me. I would, make a lot more money if such programs were much more widespread. But the point is, it's painless and it's helpful, and uh, the costs are minimal compared to with the cost of litigation or whatever. And remember when was it? I think it was Domino's, or I think Domino's. There's a big lawsuit. It was a web accessibility lawsuit.
Mm, yes.
Domino's spent a couple $1 million trying to defend themselves when the fix would have been $38,000 at the
Mm,
time. And you have to again, and that's where money comes into this equation. If you have spent if your business and you as a leader of the business have spent your career creating budgets and designing budgets and pricing and all that, and of course you haven't thought about disability, whether it's your employees or your customers, and then somebody asks you to think about it. suddenly it will appear expensive.
Yeah.
Oh my, it will really cost. That's money I don't have. But if you think about it from the start and you realize, okay, if I don't include these people, I'm cutting off a huge portion of the population that has real spending power,
Yeah.
that is eager and excited to go out and be part of the world. But how many people with disabilities, and I know them, they don't go outside because they're afraid physically for their safety, or they are afraid that someone will just be
I
an
just
asshole.
think,
Just like with design, if you start designing buildings with doors that everyone can use, everyone will use it. If
Yeah.
you create buildings that have, 5 stairs up and a heavy door handle with no push, then you've excluded, millions of people from your building.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, Peter. Last question.
Yes, sir.
What's coming up on the horizon? Any new laws, technologies, or cultural moments in accessibility that you're especially watching?
I love to see just a growing awareness of audio description in
Hmm.
broadcast media, broadcast streaming, whatever you want to call it. I think there are some amazing technological developments out there that people are working hard to do. I'm excited about the rise of the growth in venture capital put into helping create new things, new ways for people with disabilities to participate in the world. And, this wasn't a thing, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I think now there are actual organizations, fund managers raising capital to invest in, whether it's in accessible real estate or accessible vehicles. I mean, for one, I'm looking forward to the growth of the autonomous vehicle. I've ridden in one. I had a great experience. And, I'm looking forward to that. So I'm looking forward to being able to be safer
Hmm.
because there's more awareness.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to people feeling like they can participate and they don't have to be an advocate or right now, I think the circle of advocacy is pretty narrow, but I think it's growing all the time. And I think there's pressure. And I think I know there are legal or no legislative challenges out there. There are bills being worked on, whether they have to do with healthcare, with access to technology, or access to education and literacy. I think all of these are important, and I can't wait till they move forward to the next step.
Peter, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes, Adam.
so much for sharing your insight and stories with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on, asking me to do this. I'm thrilled and honored.
Thank you all for joining us while we explore accessibility and disability. If you enjoyed this podcast, check out more episodes and show notes at accessiblecommunity.org/podcasts. Remember, be accessible, be inclusive.